The room is boiling, 105 degrees. Bodies collapse onto mats, gasping for air. Sweat stings your eyes. The floor feels like it's melting beneath you. At the front, a man in a Speedo draped in gold chains screams that you're not trying hard enough. What you don't see, a secret vent blasting him with cool air while you cook alive. This isn't yoga, this is control. And when night falls, the heat takes a darker turn. Exhausted, dehydrated, barely able to think straight, you're summoned to his suite. And he tells you, "Sleep with me, or I'll die." This isn't devotion. This is spiritual blackmail, and it's only the beginning. This is the story of Bikram Choudhury, how a fake yoga championship, a $10,000 crucible, and a Rolls-Royce in flames cracked open a nightmare the justice system couldn't contain. Every empire begins with a story. And when you first heard Bikram's story, it sounded like destiny. He told you he was a child prodigy training under a legendary guru at the age of 5. By his teens, he claimed he had already conquered India's National Yoga Championships 3 years in a row. He hinted that he'd been chosen to bring ancient wisdom to the West. But none of it was true. Those championships, they never existed. His training didn't start at 5. It started when he was already a teenager. The prodigy myth was pure fiction, and yet you believed it, or at least you wanted to, because these weren't random lies. They were calculated. Bikram understood that if he made himself sound chosen, ordained, then doubting him wouldn't feel like doubting a teacher. It would feel like doubting fate itself. When you walked into his class, you felt that weight. He strutted in dripping gold, his Rolls-Royce parked outside, a Rolex flashing from his wrist. He didn't look humble, he looked untouchable. And in your mind, the logic clicked. If his method could give him this wealth, this confidence, this power, imagine what it could do for me. That's how the trap worked. Cult leaders don't just create stories to inspire. They create myths so big, so bold, that it becomes easier to believe them than to face the possibility it's all a lie. Bikram's myth wasn't just decoration, it was the foundation. Without it, everything, every studio, every training, every loyal follower would crumble. By the mid-1970s, you find yourself in Los Angeles, a city obsessed with beauty, health, and the next big thing. And in that glittering chaos, Bikram builds his stage. At first, it feels glamorous. You roll out your mat beside Hollywood stars, Raquel Welch, Susan Sarandon, the kind of people you've only ever seen on screen. The message is clear. If you want status, if you want to glow like them, you sweat in Bikram's room. And what a room it is. 105 degrees, 40% humidity, always the same, 26 postures, 2 breathing exercises, exactly 90 minutes. You don't just sweat, you dissolve. Bikram calls it purification. You start to believe it's more than exercise, that it's burning away, not just fat or toxins, but your entire identity. By the 1990s, the movement feels unstoppable. Thousands sign up for the 9-week, $10,000 teacher training. You tell yourself it's not just education, it's initiation. Each graduating class fans out across the world. And soon, you can walk into a studio in New York, Tokyo, London, Sao Paulo, and feel the same suffocating heat, the same ritual, the same promise. On the surface, it feels like a global community, but underneath, there's a catch. These studios aren't franchises. They're independent. And yet, every license fee, every recertification, every training funnels money back to Bikram. You can't escape his name or his cut. And then comes the most audacious move. In 2011, Bikram tries to copyright the sequence itself. Imagine that, owning the poses of yoga. For a moment, it looks like he might actually pull it off. But the courts shut him down, and that's when you see the first crack. For years, Bikram acted as if he was above the law, but suddenly, the law pushes back. And if he can't own yoga, he'll need to own something even stronger. You. You come expecting a guru who radiates peace. Instead, Bikram storms in dripping with gold chains, barking insults before you can even take a breath. He mocks your body. He ridicules your effort. He sneers at every flaw in front of hundreds of peers. Just when you feel crushed, he flips. A smile, a pat on the back, a rare word of praise. And in that moment, it feels like sunlight after weeks of rain. You cling to it because you don't know when it'll come again. That whiplash isn't random. Psychologists call it intermittent reinforcement. Cruelty makes you desperate for approval. The rare kindness, it makes you believe he sees something special in you. Slowly, you stop noticing the abuse because you're too busy chasing crumbs of validation. And then there's the training itself. 9 weeks, $10,000, hundreds of people, packed into hotel ballrooms, turned into sweat chambers. Days starting at 7 a.m., stretching past midnight. Hours of yoga in suffocating heat, followed by forced Bollywood marathons in Bikram's suite. Exhaustion hits you like a wall. Sleep deprivation blurs reality. And in that haze, Bikram's authority feels absolute. You're too tired to question, too drained to resist. On the second day, you're told to stand and share your deepest trauma in front of strangers. One woman breaks down, leaves, and never comes back. You want to leave too, but something stops you. The money, the pressure, the belief that this suffering must mean transformation. Meanwhile, as your body breaks down, Bikram sits under a hidden air conditioning vent, cool and comfortable, while you collapse in the heat. And that's when the truth hits you. He doesn't share your suffering. He thrives on it. You think graduation means freedom, but it doesn't. It means the trap is complete. As a certified teacher, you're not allowed to improvise. Every class is the same 90-minute script, word for word, pose for pose. Your individuality disappears. Your voice isn't your own anymore. It's his. And inside those suffocating rooms, the repetition becomes ritual. Always the same 26 postures. Always the same heat. Bikram frames it as purification, as a religion of bodily cleansing. And when you finally push through the suffering, it feels addictive, like being reborn. What you don't see is that you're being conditioned to associate pain with progress, obedience with enlightenment. The community feels loving on the surface like a family, but underneath, it's toxic. You hear racist and homophobic slurs passed off as jokes. A black teacher remembers Bikram, saying her natural hair would scare people away. You laugh nervously, because what else can you do? Every insult is a reminder of who holds the power. And then there's the money. You have to recertify every 3 years. Studios pay licensing fees just to use his name. Everything funnels upward like a pyramid, where the only one who wins is Bikram. Leaving doesn't just mean walking away. It means losing your job, your investment, your identity. That's when you realize It isn't just yoga, it's a trap. And at the top of it all is Bikram untouchable, adored, cruel, charismatic, a man who's convinced you that his approval is worth any price. But what happens when that approval takes a darker turn? For years, the rumors stayed whispers. Survivors walked out of trainings with stories of humiliation, coercion, knights summoned to Bikram's suite. But in the insulated world of the community, speaking out felt impossible. You knew that if you talked, you'd lose everything: your studio, your friends, your identity. And then, in 2013, the silence shattered. A wave of lawsuits hit Los Angeles courts. At least 6 women stepped forward, alleging harassment, assault, even imprisonment. Court filings painted a picture darker than rumor ever could. Assistants who hand-picked women for him. International volunteers so terrified, they risked violating immigration laws just to stay in his circle. And then came the insider, Meenakshi Jafarbodden, Bikram's own head of legal and international affairs. She wasn't an outsider throwing stones. She was his confidant, his fixer. But when Bikram ordered her to bury abuse investigations, she refused. He fired her. She fought back. The trial played out like a thriller. Survivors testified, evidence stacked, and for the first time, Bikram wasn't strutting through a heated studio. He was cornered in a courtroom. January 2016. The verdict: guilty of malice, oppression, and fraud. The damages almost $7 million. In that moment, the myth cracked. A jury had declared what you always suspected but never dared to say aloud. Bikram wasn't a healer. He wasn't a guru. He was an abuser cloaked in yoga pants and spiritual rhetoric, and the betrayal cut deeper because it came from inside. His own lawyer turned whistleblower. The person paid to protect him instead pulled the mask off and shattered the illusion for good. Instead of accepting the judgment, Bikram vanished. By May 2016, he had fled the United States for India. From afar, he sneered at his accusers, calling them trash and psychopaths. He bragged that people spend $1 million for a drop of my sperm. The arrogance that built his empire now insulated him from shame. You watch from across the ocean as the system scrambles to catch him. In 2017, a California court issues a warrant for his arrest after he refuses to pay Meenakshi Jafarbodden the nearly $7 million he owes. But Bikram never returns. He slips through cracks of international law, continuing to host teacher trainings in Spain and Mexico, years after the verdict. Even disgraced, even wanted, even hunted, he still has followers. And then, in 2019, the reckoning goes global. Netflix releases Bikram, yogi, guru, predator. You see the archival footage, the sweat, drenched rooms, the gold chains, the worshipping crowds, and then survivor after survivor telling their story, harrowing, raw, undeniable. One trainee, Jill Lawler, recounts how Bikram told her she had to sleep with him to save his life. Imagine being 20 years old, dehydrated, broken, told that your compliance wasn't sex, it was salvation. That's how deep the manipulation went. The documentary strips the mask away for good. The Rolls-Royces, the Rolexes, the celebrity glow, none of it matters anymore. Bikram isn't a guru. He's a predator who turned a wellness movement into his personal hunting ground. But here's what chills you most. Even after the truth is laid bare, some still defend him. Some still separate the man from the yoga. And in that blind loyalty, you see the terrifying truth about cults. Exposure doesn't always break the spell. When the lawsuits hit headlines, the community fractures, studios rebrand overnight, scraping Bikram's name off the doors. Others refuse to believe it, clinging to the idea that their guru couldn't possibly be guilty. And caught in the middle, you. For years, silence was your survival. You didn't stay quiet because you wanted to. You stayed quiet because leaving meant losing everything. Your job, your community, the identity you built around being a Bikram teacher. One survivor calls it a silent majority, people who tried to separate the man from the yoga. But deep down, you know that silence only protected him. Take Jill Lawler. She entered teacher training at just 20 years old. Bikram told her she had to sleep with him to save his life. Refusing him wasn't just saying no, it felt like denying spiritual salvation. That's how he twisted faith into blackmail. Another trainee remembers being forced to share her deepest trauma on the second day of training, humiliated in front of hundreds of strangers. She walked out, shattered. You wanted to, but you stayed because you'd already paid, already invested, already believed. Leaving meant failure. That's the cruel paradox of cults. The deeper you're hurt, the harder it becomes to admit you've been deceived. And healing? Healing doesn't just mean recovering from trauma. It means grieving the betrayal of a community that promised belonging, purity, transformation, and weaponized those very promises against you. Legally, Bikram's empire in the US collapses. Studios drop his name. Teachers scrub him from their websites. The brand that once stood for prestige now drips with scandal. But when you walk into a hot yoga studio today, the room still feels familiar. The same 26 postures, the same 105-degree heat. His method lives on just under a different name. For many teachers, it's survival. They spent thousands on his training, built their careers on his certification. To abandon it outright would mean financial ruin. For many students, it's habit. The practice feels like home, even if its creator feels like poison. And so, the sequence continues, practiced daily, even as his name is erased. Meanwhile, Bikram himself keeps moving. Spain, Mexico, hotel ballrooms filled with new disciples. Even disgraced, even wanted, even hunted, he still stands at the front of the room, sweating under the lights, worshipped as if nothing has changed. And that's what haunts you. Because cults don't just vanish when the leader falls. They mutate. They survive through ritual, through memory, through loyalty that refuses to die. Bikram's empire may have crumbled, but his shadow still lingers, stretching across every studio where his sequence is practiced, every mat where his method is repeated. You can leave the name behind, but the heat remains. So what do you take from all this? You probably think, I'd never fall for something like that. But that's the lie we all tell ourselves. Because no one joins a cult. You join a community. You join for healing, for growth, for belonging. Bikram didn't trap people with chains. He trapped them with heat, with ritual, with the promise that suffering meant progress. And once you believe that, once you hand over your money, your identity, your trust, leaving doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like betrayal. That's the danger of the double bind. Cruelty wrapped in kindness. Abuse framed as enlightenment. Charisma weaponized as authority. It doesn't feel like control until it's too late. And by then, you're already in the fire. But here's the truth. This story isn't just about Bikram. It's about us, about the human need for connection, meaning, guidance. Those needs aren't weaknesses, but they can be hijacked by a guru, by a movement, by anyone who convinces you that obedience equals love, that suffering equals growth. So ask yourself, where in your own life are you mistaking cruelty for wisdom, control for care, charisma for truth? Because the next guru might not be a man in a Speedo screaming in a yoga room. It might be a boss, a partner, a friend, a movement. And here's where you come in. Silence protects predators. Speaking out, even when it costs, is what breaks the spell. If this story opened your eyes, share it. Talk about it. Leave your thoughts in the comments, I want to hear them. Because the more we shine a light on manipulation, the harder it is for predators to hide in the dark. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe. Because the next time someone hides behind charisma, behind ritual, behind a mask of enlightenment, I want you to see it before you get burned.